Hi, today I'm going to demonstrate how to create and use variables in Java. I'm going to demonstrate how to create variables within main, and I'm going to create private class variables above main. I have your standard Java project built by Visual Studio Code. I renamed my class to be Java variables, and of course, the file names match. A variable is a place in memory that you can hold data. All programming languages use them, and all programming languages set up in very similar ways. The declaration for a variable is the creation of the variable. It's going to start with the same thing. You're going to start with the data type. You're going to start with the variable name, and you're going to start and then have an optional value. This here is optional, although it's a really good idea to do so. I'm putting it in boxes because it's optional. So data types are many. They're primitive data types that exist in Java, and the primitive data types include things like int, long, which is a bigger integer, byte, which is a small integer. You also have things like floats and double. So these guys are for whole numbers. Whole numbers like 5, 6, -2, -5, etc. Doubles are things like rational numbers or real numbers. So like pi is a double. Gravity is a double. Your salary, hourly wage, anything that have a decimal point would be a double. Now the differences between data types are straightforward. Each one of these whole number types will hold a whole number. Each one of these will hold a rational real number. The difference is depending on the size. All right, so what we've got here is I've got a page from W3 Schools, and they show the standard Java primitive data types. Byte, short, int, long, float, double, boolean, char, or char, depending on how to pronounce it. The difference is when you use them is the value you're going to hold there. So if you know you're only storing a small number of things like the number of children in a household, byte would be fine. Short, between -32,000 and +32,000, int, 2 billion to +2 billion, -9 whatever that is to +9 whatever that is for long. The size is how many bytes of RAM they take, because variables are stored in memory. Way back when Java was new and programming was new, we really cared about this. Now that we can get 6 gigabytes of RAM in a laptop, it's not as big of a deal. Float and double tell you how many decimal places they can hold, 6 to 7 decimal places or 15 decimal places. This is the levels of precision. Booleans, true or false, and char, single letters. There is also a Java type string, but it's not primitive. What primitive means, you can't break them down into component parts. String isn't primitive because it's made up of a whole bunch of chars. All right, so Java has these variables types. C++ has the exact same variable types. C# has pretty much the same variable types. Once you learn one, you're good for everywhere. All right, so let's declare a variable. So I decided to use int to store my kids. I've got 5 kids. I don't. I have 2, but you get the idea. If I want to use my salary, it holds a value. Visual Studio Code is yelling at me because I haven't used these yet. And it says it's not been used yet. That is a memory protection. It's also a logic protection saying, hey, if you created this variable, you should probably use it. If you declare a variable and not use it, not a big deal. If you declare a variable and don't initialize it, you can cause problems later. So let's watch. So I'm going to display these. My machine is really chuggy today. I can simply display it like that. And I'm going to run this. I'll get 5 down here in my outputs. See, 5. If you want better output, because just putting the 5 there doesn't mean anything. I can concatenate it as I just did here. And I get output. If I try to use a variable that's not been declared, or rather has not been defined, like planets. Planets is built, but doesn't have a value. It tells me right that the local variable may not have been initialized. Kids is initialized because it has a value. Salary is initialized because it has a value. Planets is not. If I ignore that error and try to run it, Java just dies. And I need to fix it. If I try to proceed, it'll run the last version that works, and then I got an error here. Planets is not initialized. You can initialize planets here on the creation, after the fact, or you can do inputs to put variables. You can also do math to store the variables. As long as you put a value into this variable, it's usable. So now our planets including Pluto. So what I've done is I've created variables within main. They can be seen within these curly braces. It's said to be within the scope of the variable. Sometimes you want variables visible across your entire project. In Java, those are called class-level variables. Some programmers don't like using these. Old programmers like me were taught to never use these variables. So you often hear the phrase global variables. Modern programmers allow it because it becomes a class-level variable. If you want to create a class-level variable, do it up here inside your class. It's recommend do it up above, very top. And you would do up here, you use privates. Private means it can only be seen within this particular object. Now, I've set float here to pi. It's yelling at me because I made a float. I'm going to fix this later. But for right now, let me do double. Now it's happy. Pi, since it's defined up here, can be used down here in main. The scope of kids, salary, and planets is within main. The scope of pi is within Java variables. Everything in Java variables can see it. When you start to create methods, that's a nice, easy way to pass things around in methods. Some of your program instructors will yell at you. I think it's okay. All right, so now we have an issue with Java. I can't use pi here because main is static. Static is a reference to the class. That means when I instantiate Java variables, only one copy of main will be built. That's fine. The downside is anytime you try to use something inside of a static function, everything you're calling has to be static. So I'm going to put static up here. Now my error goes away, and now I can use pi. Okay, so now I want to go back to the problem I had with float before. .8 is a decimal point, so it should be usable in float. The problem is how Java treats these literals. These literals are the numbers I'm literally typing into my program. So 5 is an int. 555.55, 3.14, and 9.8 are considered to be double. So if you want to use float, which is fine because you use less memory and don't need as much decimal spaces, but you're trying to physically type a number here, we have to do something called typecasting, which should convert this into the variable type. To typecast in Java and most other languages, you put in front of the value what type you want. So I put floats in front of my 9.8. The error goes away because now I say take 9.8, convert it from a float or from a double down to a float, put it here. This type of error only occurs typically when you're going from a bigger data type to a smaller data type. If you're not sure what I mean by bigger or smaller, look at the size here. Double was 8 bytes, float was 4 bytes. So when I tried to store a double in a float, mathematically it wouldn't fit. When I converted it by using the typecast on the float, it made it a 4-byte value. All right, so that's it for numerical variables. If you wish to use a string variable, and I can put a string in there. Everything I did with numeric variables works the same with strings. String is not primitive, but it is built into Java. It's part of the Java language, so feel free to use them. All right, so you've seen how to create variables, you've seen how to initialize them, how to make class level variables, and how to make variables within a scope. Thanks for watching. Good luck.